All right, we've had quite the time discovering how we trace the energy from organism to organism as it moves up and around in the food chain. We've discussed how food chains are simpler versions of the interactions between organisms to get a more accurate and overall picture. Typically, scientists will use food webs, which show more than one pathway or energy transfer. Now, today, and this is our last day of official notes, we're going to talk about energy specifically. So we talked about who eats whom yesterday. Today, we're talking about energy. We did this using the energy pyramid. Now, if you remember these fellows that we identified a food chain for, we identified the caterpillar is eaten by the turtle is eaten by the gator, and the gator is eaten by the human. Remember who eats who. We're missing, again, in this system, our producers or our autotrophs. So all of these organisms we would classify as heterotrophs or consumers, meaning that they cannot produce their own food. While if we put in our producer or our autotroph who does photosynthesis, therefore making their own food, we would have a complete system. Now, I've got for your bell ringer today, that was just a reminder of where we've been. And we're actually going to be tracing the energy transfer from our producer all the way up to our apex predator, which in this system right here is the human. But I need you for your bell ringer today to fix or correct the following sentences. So I have a bald eagle are consumers means they're autotrophs. So please correct the grammar and spelling of that first sentence for your bell ringer. Please also correct the second sentence. As I move up the food chain, I'm increase in energy. Please correct that sentence as well. And then pause this video. When you're done, unpause it. Now that you've corrected the sentence for the grammatical errors, please correct these sentences so that they are scientifically correct. What would I have to do to the first sentence to make it correct? And what would I have to do to the second sentence to make it correct? For the first sentence, bald eagles, they are consumers, which does not mean that they're autotrophs. If they are consumer, remember we said that consumers are heterotrophs. That's how you correct for science the first sentence. And for science, the second sentence we're going to actually learn about today. So as I move up the food chain, I'm actually decreasing in the amount of energy that is passed from one organism to the other. We're getting less of that original energy. So instead of increase, you need to write decrease. And then my last question, why might writing matter to a scientist? One of the big things about science is that you can discover all day long, but if you can't communicate what you've discovered, then it doesn't matter. So scientists not only need to be great scientists, they also need to be great writers. And the more professional the writing, the more believable the scientific discovery is. Are you going to take a scientist seriously if they don't capitalize the first word of their sentence or put periods? I don't think so. So that's what I would like you to do today for your bell ringer. And then I have a video for you to also watch. I've linked it to Canvas. It kind of explains where we're going with the food pyramid. We don't want to play right now, though. All right, so where we're going. This is our trophic level pyramid. Get these notes out. Again, it does you no good to copy the notes, plus I've changed them a little bit, from this screen right here. Listening to the lecture is the best way to get the information that you need for the day. Let's start. So this is what we call an energy pyramid. It illustrates that the energy available for consumers decreases as it travels through the food chain. So as we're going up, up, up our system, we are actually decreasing in the amount of energy available for the organisms. Here's an example food chain that would be common. This is looks to be a forest food chain. You've got as your decomposers, our funguses, our annelids or worms as well. And then our autotrophs use those nutrients that the decomposers create or make as they decompose the organisms. and the plants use that so that they can grow, and then eventually something eats those plants. That something is called a consumer. Our picture here, we've got a squirrel, a bird, and a bug. Those herbivores, which only eat plants, are then later eaten by another predator, which we called our secondary consumer. That could be something like a frog or snake. And then what we called our tertiary consumer would be our fox in this example. So what we're going to learn today is that the fox, or the top of this pyramid, must eat a lot more than the bottom of the pyramid because there's less kilocalories available per organism that they eat. We call this rule of thumb the 10% rule, which means that only 10% of the energy is passed from the organism or the food to the next thing, the consumer, whatever is eaten. So if I am eating a nice green crunchy salad, I am only getting 10% of the energy from the salad. The rest of the energy is lost in metabolic heat processes. So as we do those chemical processes, heat is released into the environment. That's a waste product. We can't use that. The organisms can't use that. It's just lost. The other percentages of energies are used for the general cellular processes of that organism. So we're only getting 10%. Lastly, a little bit of verbiage for you. Trophic, the word trophic level, comes from the Greek word meaning food, which is trophy. So you'll see the more we learn about words, the better able you will be to decipher some of these unknown words. So trophic comes from the Greek word trophy, meaning food. Here is an example of the energy pyramid and something to help you understand the 10% rule a little bit more. Hopefully that video that you watched earlier also explains it though as well. So if I am having 100% of my energy in my primary producers, my plants, when the primary consumers or the rabbit eats my leaf, it is only getting 10% of that 100% energy that it consumes. Now, unfortunately, when that wolf comes to eat my rabbit, it is only getting 1% of that original 100% of the energy. And then, say, a hunter comes along a hunter is what eats a wolf. So a hunter comes along and shoots the wolf and takes it home for dinner. That hunter is the third level consumer, or my tertiary consumer, and it is only getting 0.1% or 1/10 of the original energy that primary producer produces. And then lastly, if something were to eat me, say a shark, that shark is only getting 1/100th% of the energy that was originally produced by the plants. So you can see that we're getting 10% of 100 is 10, 10% of 10% is 1, 10% of 1% is 1/10, and 10% of 1/10 is 1/100th. So these apex predators, when they're consuming things, they're getting less energy than if they were to just eat the primary producers. Good? And just recall, this is because a lot of that energy is released as heat, which means it's unusable to whatever it is that was eating it. Good. Remember, again, an overarching theme, the sun is the ultimate source of energy because that is what powers photosynthesis. And once everything dies, no matter what level it is getting broken down by our decomposers, which are worms, funguses, and bacteria, and that helps recycle the nutrients so that they can be used again by different organisms. Good. Now at the base of our energy pyramid are what we call decomposers, our brown things. They return nutrients to the producers. They are things, for your example, in your pyramid, I would like you to write worms, funguses, and bacteria. Remember we talked about, for the most part, a good rule of thumb, the bacteria are what are going to break down your dead organic animal matter, and the fungus is what's going to break down your dead organic plant matter. Moving right along. The next level, the nutrients produced by those decomposers are used by producers to create energy in photosynthesis. So producers transform energy from the sun. Remember, our energy comes from the sun. No matter if you've eaten a plant today or an animal, it came from the sun because that animal ate a plant. So it transforms energy from the sun into a large amount of plant energy through the process of photosynthesis. Remember, photosynthesis needs carbon dioxide, water, and sun energy to create glucose or sugar, and oxygen as a byproduct. So photosynthesis. Some things that do photosynthesis are any kind of plant you could imagine. So corn, I've got a tree here, I've got milkweed here. You could put things down like avocados or mangoes, or just simple grass that they eat, or dandelions, or pine trees. Any plant that is eaten is a producer. Then our primary consumers eat those producers. So these are animals that eat plants. They are called primary because they are the first consumers. This should sound very familiar to what we learned yesterday. We learned yesterday that in an aquatic ecosystem, the primary consumers are often zooplankton, or tiny microscopic animals found in the water. Often they are the larva form of crustaceans like crabs or baby fish. Other primary consumers are things like bunnies, and just because I don't want you to get the misconception that all primary consumers are small animals, an elephant is also considered a primary consumer because they eat grass or plant vegetation. The secondary consumer is the animal that eats other animals. They are many times omnivores, meaning that they eat both plants and animals. They eat the primary consumer, so those are things like snakes. Frogs are also secondary consumers because frogs eat insects and insects eat the grass. Coyotes can be secondary consumers, and a lion is also, I gave it a lot of thought, and many of our large cats that are carnivorous, they are actually secondary consumers because they often prey on herb eating organisms like antelope and zebra. So many of our large cats are only secondary consumers. All right, and by the way, this could end the food chain. If the lion is the end of the food chain, then you've only have 3 steps in your food chain. You don't have to go all the way up to apex predator or tertiary. You can just have a couple of steps. And by the way, if I'm eating a salad, then my food chain is only 2 steps. I've eaten the plant or the producer, and I am the primary consumer. So don't think it needs to go completely through all of these steps. Next is our tertiary consumer, which we've labeled the top predator. These are animals that eat secondary consumers. They are usually the top of their food chain. I've got an example, like the snake could be my top predator, the bald eagle could be my top predator, the dolphin could be my top predator, or the velociraptor could be my top predator. Now, because of this 10% rule that we talked about right here, again, my apex predator, in order to get the nutrients it needs, has got to eat a lot more of stuff or prey, it doesn't matter if it's the same prey or different prey, to survive than my primary consumer. My primary consumer gets a lot more energy because they are going directly to the source. Good. And then my exit ticket, something I want you to think about. Identify the transfer of energy in an ecosystem. Please identify a producer, consumer, herbivore, omnivore, and carnivore in this picture. So pause the video. All right. The producer in this ecosystem that I can see are our phytoplankton right down here in the ice, actually. And then, so that's a producer. I can see a primary consumer right here with our zooplankton. And then we learned that many of these zooplankton are eaten by fish. So that could be a secondary consumer. And then the fish are most likely eaten, are most likely eaten by this seal right here. And then if you didn't know, seals are food for our polar bears. A polar bear would be considered completely carnivorous because they only eat meat. And seals are typically only carnivorous as well. Our starfish here are scavengers. They would be considered herbivores or omnivores because they eat anything on the ground that's dead, but it is typically meat-based. And I don't actually see any omnivores in this picture. I'm not sure about a jellyfish, whether it eats both plants and animals. Beautiful. Here's a picture of that drawn up for you. All right. Have a great day, guys.